The Zephyrian Consortium had been in the business of acquiring premium biological assets for 3 centuries, and they prided themselves on their refined taste in sentient merchandise. Not for them the crude slavers who grabbed anything with opposable thumbs and a pulse. No, the Zephyrians were connoisseurs of flesh, specialists in the art of selective harvesting. They had catalogs, they had market research, they had focus groups, for crying out loud. Commander Vextool adjusted his decorative throat sack as he reviewed the latest acquisition reports from the Outer Rim territories. The numbers were disappointing. The Alterian juveniles had proven too fragile for heavy labor, and the Centauri younglings kept trying to photosynthesize their way out of containment. What the Consortium needed was a species with adaptability, resilience, and that special combination of intelligence and malleability that made for premium workers. "Commander," his aide Kixmore chittered through his translator, "the scouting reports from the Sol system have arrived." Vexthool's compound eyes swiveled toward the datapad with the enthusiasm of a tax collector discovering an unaudited fortune. The preliminary biological surveys were promising. The dominant species, these humans, showed remarkable adaptability across diverse environments. Their juveniles displayed impressive learning capabilities and emotional bonds that made them tractable. Best of all, their technological development was laughably primitive. No interstellar travel, no energy weapons, no quantum communication networks. They were still burning fossil fuels like barbarians. "Delicious," Vexthool rumbled, his throat sac pulsing with satisfaction. "Schedule a harvest mission. Something modest to start with. 50 specimens should suffice for initial market testing." Dr. Quillanara, the Consortium's chief xenobiologist, had the sort of scientific detachment that came from decades of treating sentient beings like particularly interesting lab rats. She approached the holding pens with the clinical enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed that knowledge justified any means of acquisition. The human juveniles had been processed 6 hours ago, and their vital signs were stabilizing nicely. "Fascinating," she murmured to her recording device. "Initial stress responses are within acceptable parameters. The specimens show remarkable emotional resilience. Note the way they've already begun forming protective clusters around the smaller individuals." The children huddled together in the sterile containment facility, their faces streaked with tears but their eyes blazing with defiance. Mika, barely 12 years old, had appointed herself the guardian of the younger ones. Torren, 14 and built like a young oak tree, positioned himself between the aliens and the group whenever the guards approached. Zoe, quiet and analytical at 13, was already studying the lock mechanisms with the sort of intensity that should have worried their captors. "The emotional bonds appear stronger than anticipated," Dr. Clinari continued. "This could be exploited for behavioral modification. Threaten one, control the group. Very efficient." What the good doctor failed to recognize was that human protective instincts worked both ways. While she saw vulnerability to exploit, she was actually cataloging the exact reasons why humanity would burn the galaxy to ash to get these children back. The Galactic Oversight Council convened in their crystal spires above the trade world of Nexus Prime, a gathering of species so diverse that the translator algorithms occasionally had nervous breakdowns, trying to convert concepts like honor or justice between radically different cultural frameworks. Today's agenda was refreshingly routine: trade disputes, territorial boundaries, and the usual bureaucratic minutiae that kept a galaxy of quarreling species from devolving into complete chaos. Councillor Threscall, a being who resembled a cross between a praying mantis and a filing cabinet, droned through the morning reports with the enthusiasm of someone reading a tax code. Item 47. The Zephyrian Consortium reports successful acquisition of new labor assets from the Sol system. Estimated market value, moderate. Expected resistance, negligible. The other councillors barely looked up from their datapads. Humans were unregistered, unaligned, and apparently uninteresting. Just another primitive species contributing to the galactic economy in the only way they knew how. The Andorian representative made a note about potential mining applications. The vegan ambassador wondered if humans might be suitable for agricultural work. No one bothered to ask what the humans themselves might think about these career opportunities. 8 billion light-years away, in a solar system that the galactic community had dismissed as barely worth the cost of a hyperspace beacon, something was stirring. Earth's military command centers hummed with activity that had nothing to do with their usual terrestrial squabbles. Admiral Reginald Blackthorne stood before a holographic display showing the last known trajectory of the alien vessel, his face carved from granite and weathered by 4 decades of military service. 47 children, he said quietly, his voice carrying the sort of controlled fury that made hardened soldiers step back. Taken from Settlement Bravo 7 while their parents were in the fields. The assembled officers said nothing. They had all seen the recordings from the surveillance drones, the alien ship descending like a mechanical vulture, the children playing in the settlement's central plaza one moment, gone the next, the parents returning to find nothing but scorch marks, and the lingering ozone smell of exotic propulsion systems. "Sir!" Captain Elena Vasquez spoke up, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her dark eyes. "The Retribution's Edge is ready for launch. We've traced their quantum signature through the Foldspace network." Blackthorn nodded slowly. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet had been humanity's best-kept secret for 2 decades, hidden behind a carefully maintained facade of primitive technology and peaceful intentions. Let the galaxy think humans were still banging rocks together. Let them believe Earth was just another backwater world full of harmless primitives. It made the surprise so much more effective. "Launch when ready, Captain, and remember, we're not going to negotiate." The Zephyrian processing station orbited a dead star in the Kepler 442 system, a monument to industrial efficiency and casual cruelty. It was here that the Consortium's acquisitions were sorted, catalogued, and prepared for distribution to buyers across the galaxy. The human children had been assigned to Level 7, a sterile environment designed for premium biological assets that required special handling. Commander Vextool was reviewing the initial medical reports when his communications officer began making the sort of distressed noises that suggested either equipment malfunction or impending doom. Given the Zephyrian gift for precise language, the translation came out as, "Commander, we have a situation that may require immediate attention and possibly the services of a competent theologian." "Explain," Vextool commanded, his throat sac deflating with annoyance. "Unknown vessels have just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Configuration unknown, energy signatures unknown. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." The message, when it came, was delivered in perfect galactic standard, which should have been impossible for a species that hadn't achieved interstellar travel. The voice was female, calm, and carried the sort of measured politeness that predators used just before they pounced. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. You are currently in possession of 47 human children, abducted from Earth Colony Bravo 7. You will return them immediately unharmed and surrender yourselves for trial under Terran Military Justice Code. You have exactly 1 hour to comply." Vexthool's throat sac swelled with indignation. The audacity! Some primitive species had somehow acquired spaceflight and now thought they could make demands of the Zephyrian Consortium? He activated the communication array with theatrical flourish. "Unknown vessels. This is Commander Vextool of the Zephyrian Consortium. You are interfering with legitimate commercial operations. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came with the sort of mechanical precision that suggested it had been rehearsed. "Commander Vextool, you have 59 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. I should mention that our targeting systems are already locked onto your facility's critical infrastructure points. For your information, humans consider the abduction of children to be a crime punishable by death. We're not really in a negotiating mood." What followed was a masterclass in the difference between threatening and promising. The human fleet consisted of 12 vessels, each one a testament to the sort of engineering that emerged when a species spent centuries perfecting the art of killing each other and then suddenly had to look outward. The ships were sleek, angular, and covered in the sort of sensory equipment that suggested their builders had very specific ideas about target acquisition. The Zephyrian Defense Fleet numbered 47 vessels, a coincidence that Captain Vasquez noted with grim satisfaction. They were larger than the human ships, more heavily armed according to conventional galactic standards, and absolutely confident in their superiority. This confidence lasted approximately 17 seconds after the first human vessel opened fire. Human weapons technology had evolved from a simple principle. If you wanted to kill something, you found the most efficient way to deliver the maximum amount of energy to the target in the shortest possible time. The Zephyrian shields designed to deflect conventional plasma weapons simply ceased to exist when confronted with compressed antimatter warheads, accelerated to 90% of light speed. Vexthool watched his flagship's defensive systems evaporate like morning dew and finally understood that he was dealing with a species that had spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to murder each other with increasing efficiency. The human vessels moved with predatory grace, their weapons systems cycling through target acquisition with the mechanical precision of a factory assembly line. "Sir," his weapons officer reported with the sort of calm that came from professional shock, "their ships are equipped with technologies that shouldn't exist. Their targeting computers are processing combat data faster than our defensive systems can respond. It's like they're fighting a war that's already over." The human fleet carved through the Zephyrian defenses with surgical precision, disabling rather than destroying most of the vessels. This wasn't mercy, it was practicality. Dead aliens couldn't answer questions, and the humans had a lot of questions about the Consortium's operations. Captain Vasquez's boarding party moved through the processing station with the sort of methodical efficiency that comes from extensive experience in hostile environments. They had studied the station's blueprints during the approach, identified the optimal breach points, and planned their routes with the attention to detail that characterized human military operations. The children were found in Containment Level 7, huddled together, but unbroken. Mika looked up at the armored figures with eyes that had seen too much, but when Captain Vasquez removed her helmet and smiled, the girl's face crumpled with relief. "We're going home," Vasquez said simply, and 47 children began to cry. The Zephyrian medical staff tried to explain their research protocols, their careful documentation of human biological responses, their scientific approach to species evaluation. They seemed genuinely confused when the human soldiers looked at them with the sort of cold hatred usually reserved for child predators. Dr. Quilnara found herself facing a human interrogator who listened to her detailed explanation of Consortium operations with the sort of professional interest that she mistook for scientific curiosity. She provided names, locations, customer lists, and operational procedures with the eager cooperation of someone who thought she was talking to a colleague. "Fascinating," the interrogator said when she finished. "You've been very helpful, Doctor." It was only when the plasma rifle powered up that Dr. Quilnara realized she had misunderstood the nature of the conversation. The trials, such as they were, lasted exactly as long as it took to confirm the prisoners' identities and review their crimes. Human military justice was refreshingly straightforward. If you harmed human children, you died. The method was quick, efficient, and broadcast across the galactic communication networks with the sort of matter-of-fact directness that made the message unmistakable. Admiral Blackthorn's address to the Galactic Council was delivered from the bridge of the dreadnought Implacable, a vessel that hadn't existed in any intelligence reports and shouldn't have been possible given humanity's supposed technological limitations. The Admiral appeared as a hologram in the Council chambers, his weathered face set in the sort of expression that suggested he was discussing the weather, rather than fundamentally reshaping galactic politics. "Esteemed councillors," he began with the sort of courtesy that barely concealed complete contempt, "I am Admiral Reginald Blackthorn of the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. I'm addressing you today to clarify humanity's position regarding the recent unpleasantness with the Zephyrian Consortium." The council chamber was silent. The Zephyrian representative had not attended the session, primarily because he no longer existed in any meaningful sense. "For the record," Blackthorn continued, "Earth considers the abduction of human children to be an act of war. We have responded accordingly. The Zephyrian Consortium has been permanently dissolved, their assets seized, and their personnel processed through our justice system. This is not a negotiation. This is notification." Councillor Threshold managed to activate his translator long enough to stammer, "Admiral, surely we can discuss this through proper diplomatic channels." "Councillor," Blackthorn interrupted with the sort of smile that made grown beings consider career changes, "you seem to be under the impression that we're negotiating. We're not. We're informing you of new management policies. Any individual or organization involved in the trafficking of human beings will be hunted down and eliminated. Any government that harbors such individuals will be considered hostile. Any council that fails to prevent such activities will be considered complicit." The hologram flickered as the transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. The representative from the Altarian Republic was the first to speak. Did he just threaten the entire galactic government?" "I believe," said the vegan ambassador slowly, "that he just promised to replace it." The children were returned to Earth to heroes' welcomes and the sort of psychological support that human civilization had learned to provide after centuries of traumatic experience. They would heal, eventually, but their ordeal had triggered something in the human psyche that couldn't be easily contained. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet expanded rapidly, drawing personnel from every branch of human military service. Ships that had existed only in classified blueprints rolled off production lines with the sort of efficiency that had once terrified Earth's own populations. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when a species that had spent millennia perfecting warfare suddenly had targets worth the effort. Captain Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Retribution's edge, watching the hyperspace coordinates scroll past on her navigation display. The fleet was hunting again, tracking down the Consortium's former customers, dismantling their operations piece by piece. The work was methodical, thorough, and conducted with the sort of professional competence that had characterized human military operations since the species first picked up pointed sticks. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 different systems. They're offering to hand over any humans in their possession and provide full cooperation with our investigation." Vasquez nodded approvingly. Fear was a tool, and humans had learned to use it effectively. The galaxy was a large place, but it was also a connected place. Word traveled fast when a species demonstrated that it was willing to burn civilizations to ash to protect its children. "Acknowledge their offers," she ordered, "and remind them that cooperation is mandatory, not optional." The irony was not lost on the galactic community. For centuries they had dismissed Earth as a primitive world full of violent savages who couldn't even achieve interstellar travel. Now they were learning that humanity's apparent technological backwardness had been a deliberate deception, and that the species they had considered harmless predators were actually apex predators who had been waiting for someone to give them a reason to expand their territory. The Zephyrian Consortium had provided that reason. They had taken human children, and in doing so they had awakened something that the galaxy wasn't prepared to face. Humanity was no longer content to remain in their small corner of space, nursing their wounds and pretending to be harmless. They were coming for anyone who had ever harmed a human being, and they were bringing the sort of military technology that emerged when a species spent its entire history learning to kill efficiently. The children were home. But the hunt was just beginning, and in the cold void between the stars, 47 human warships spread out across the galaxy like the fingers of a grasping hand, each one carrying the promise that humanity would never again be considered prey. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating a species that considered the protection of its young to be worth any price. Unfortunately for the galaxy, the lesson had cost them everything they thought they knew about the balance of power in civilized space. Humanity was no longer asking for a seat at the galactic table. They were building their own table, and everyone else was invited to sit wherever humans decided they belonged.